Clara Mitchell dropped to her knees in the snow, her frozen fingers pulling the unconscious boy against her chest. His lips were blue. His skin was ice. And somewhere deep in her shattered heart, she saw her own dead daughter's face staring back at her. She couldn't save Lily. She couldn't save Daniel. But God help her, she would not let this child die alone in the cold. What Clara didn't know was that this boy's father owned half of Montana Territory, and by morning his armed riders would surround her cabin demanding answers she couldn't give. Before we ride deeper into this story, hit subscribe and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to see how far this tale travels. The winter of 1883 came early to Silver Creek, Montana Territory, and it came without mercy. Clara Mitchell stood at her cabin window, watching the snow fall thick and relentless across the land that had taken everything from her. 4 years since Daniel died in that mine collapse. 2 years since little Lily followed him burning up with fever, while Clara held her helpless through the night. Now it was just her, a widow at 34, a woman alone in a territory that had no use for women alone. "You're a fool, Clara Mitchell," she whispered to herself. "A damn fool for staying." But where would she go? This cabin, small as it was, had been built by Daniel's hands. The chicken coop out back still wore his crooked carpentry like a badge. And Lily was buried on the hill behind the house under the oak tree she used to climb. Leaving meant leaving them. And Clara wasn't ready for that. Maybe she'd never be ready. The wind howled against the walls, finding every crack Daniel had meant to fix someday. Clara pulled her shawl tighter and turned away from the window. She had work to do, eggs to gather in the morning, bread to bake for Mrs. Patterson's order. Life didn't stop just because your heart did. She was halfway to her bed when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the storm. A cry maybe, or a moan, something human and desperate cutting through the wind. Clara froze. "Just the wind," she told herself. "Just the trees." But her feet were already moving toward the door. Her hand was already reaching for Daniel's old coat on the hook. Her heart was already pounding with something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Or maybe fear. She couldn't tell the difference anymore. She opened the door, and the cold hit her like a fist. Snow swirled into the cabin, stinging her face, blinding her for a moment. She lifted the lantern high and squinted into the white darkness. Nothing. Just snow and shadow, and the endless howl of winter. "Hello?" Her voice came out cracked and thin. "Is someone there?" The wind answered with silence. Clara was about to close the door to tell herself she'd imagined it when she saw the dark shape in the snow, 20 feet from her porch. Small. Motionless. Her blood went cold. She was running before she knew it, the snow grabbing at her boots, the cold burning her lungs. She fell once, caught herself, kept going. And when she reached the shape and dropped to her knees beside it, her heart stopped. A boy. 9, maybe 10 years old. Curled on his side in the snow, his clothes soaked through his face white as death. His eyes were closed. His lips were blue. "No." Clara's voice broke. "No, no, no." She pressed her fingers to his throat. For one terrible moment she felt nothing. Then faint as a whisper, a pulse. Weak, fading. But there. "You're alive." She was crying now, tears freezing on her cheeks. "You're alive, and you're gonna stay that way. You hear me?" The boy didn't answer. Clara gathered him in her arms. He weighed nothing. Less than Lily had weighed at 6. She could feel his bones through his wet clothes, sharp and fragile as bird wings. "Hold on," she whispered, struggling to her feet. "Just hold on." She carried him through the snow, through the door, into the cabin's meager warmth. She laid him on the floor near the fireplace and threw every piece of wood she had onto the flames. The fire roared to life, pushing back the cold, but the boy didn't move. Clara stripped off his wet clothes with shaking hands. His skin was ice. His fingers and toes were white, the first signs of frostbite already setting in. Don't you die on me." She wrapped him in every blanket she owned, layering them thick around his small body. "Don't you dare die on me." She heated water on the stove, soaked rags in it, pressed them to his chest and feet and hands. She rubbed his limbs to get the blood moving. She talked to him constantly, a stream of nonsense words meant to keep him tethered to the world. "You're safe now. You're warm. I've got you. I've got you." An hour passed. Then 2. The fire burned low, and Clara fed it more wood. She couldn't spare wood that was supposed to last the week. She didn't care. She'd burn the furniture if she had to. She'd burn the cabin itself. Just don't let him die. Please, God, don't let another child die in my arms. Sometime past midnight, the boy's eyes opened. Clara was dozing in the chair beside him, exhausted beyond measure when she felt him stir. She jolted awake, leaning forward, and found him staring at her with eyes the color of dark honey. "You're awake." Her voice came out rough with relief. "Oh, thank God, you're awake." The boy's lips moved, but no sound came out. He tried again. Where?" "You're safe. You're in my cabin. I found you in the snow outside." His eyes darted around the room, wild with fear. He tried to sit up and fell back immediately, too weak to move. "Easy." Clara put a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Easy now. You're hurt. You need to rest." "They're coming." His voice was a rasp, barely audible. "They're coming for me." "Who's coming?" The men who took me." Clara's blood went cold again, but she kept her voice calm. "What men? Who are you?" The boy's eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment she saw something ancient in them. Something that had seen too much for a child his age. "My name is Jacob Hartwell. My pa owns Hartwell Ranch." Clara's breath caught. Everyone in Montana Territory knew that name. Thomas Hartwell, the cattle baron. The man who owned more land than some states, whose word was law across 5 counties, whose money built half the towns between here and the Canadian border. And this half-frozen child wrapped in her blankets was his son. "Lord have mercy," Clara whispered. "Please." Jacob's hand found hers, his grip weak but desperate. "Please don't send me back to them. They'll kill me. They said they'd kill me if I ran, and now they're coming." Who's coming?" "Porter's men. They took me from the road 3 days ago. Said my pa owed them money. Said they'd get what was owed one way or another." Clara's jaw tightened. Cornelius Porter. The name tasted like poison. She knew Porter. Everyone in Silver Creek knew Porter. He owned the general store, the feed supply, half the mortgages in town. He smiled with his mouth and calculated with his eyes, and more than one family had lost everything after falling into his debt. Clara herself owed him $37 for flour and medicine she'd bought last winter. He'd reminded her of that debt just last week, his voice soft and pleasant, while his eyes promised consequences. And now this. A kidnapped boy. A ransom scheme against the most powerful man in the territory. She was in the middle of something far bigger and far more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. "Mrs. Jacob's voice pulled her back. "I don't know your name." "Clara. Clara Mitchell. Mrs. Mitchell." His eyes were heavy exhaustion pulling him back under. "Will you help me? Will you help me find my pa?" Clara looked at this child, this stranger's child, this boy who'd stumbled into her life and dropped a weight on her shoulders she couldn't carry. She thought about what helping him would cost her. The danger, the attention, the questions from Porter and his men. She thought about her quiet life, her small routines, the careful walls she'd built around her broken heart. And then she thought about Lily, about the fever that took her, about all the people in Silver Creek who'd stayed away afraid of catching sickness, leaving Clara to watch her daughter die alone. No one had helped her then, but she wasn't no one. She was Clara Mitchell, and she'd be damned if she'd let a child suffer when she could do something about it. "Yes." She squeezed his hand gently. "Yes, I'll help you. But right now you need to sleep. Can you do that for me?" Jacob nodded weakly. His eyes were already closing. Mrs. Mitchell. Yes. Thank you for not leaving me in the snow. Clara's throat tightened. Sleep now. We'll figure the rest out in the morning. Within minutes, his breathing evened out, and he was asleep. Clara sat back in her chair and stared at the fire, her mind racing. She had to get word to Thomas Hartwell, had to let him know his son was alive and safe. But how? Silver Creek was 15 miles away, and she had no horse. And if Porter's men were looking for Jacob, they'd be watching the roads. Tomorrow. She'd figure it out tomorrow. For now, the boy needed rest, and so did she. But sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lily's face. Lily's smile. Lily's small hand going limp in hers. I couldn't save you, sweetheart. But maybe I can save him. Maybe that'll be enough. Ed. Dawn came gray and cold, the snow still falling in lazy spirals from a sky that couldn't decide whether to storm or clear. Clara woke stiff and aching in the chair, her neck bent at an angle that would punish her all day. Jacob was still asleep by the fire, his color better now, his breathing deep and even. She stood slowly, wincing, and moved to the window. The snow outside was unmarked, except for her own tracks from last night already half filled. Good. No one had come. Not yet. She set about making breakfast, stirring up a thin porridge from the last of her oats, slicing bread she'd baked 2 days ago. When she turned back to the fire, Jacob was awake, watching her with those old young eyes. Morning, Clara said. How you feeling? Better. He pushed himself up to sitting, wincing. My hands hurt. That's the blood coming back. It'll hurt for a while, but that's good. Means nothing's dead. She brought him a bowl of porridge and sat across from him while he ate. He devoured it like he hadn't seen food in days, which she realized he probably hadn't. When did you last eat? She asked. Don't remember. 2 days maybe. They gave me water sometimes. Not much else. Clara's hands curled into fists. Tell me about them. About Porter's men. Jacob set down the empty bowl. His face went hard, older than his years. There were 3 of them. They stopped the wagon I was riding in. My pa was sending me to stay with my aunt and Helena while he dealt with some business. Said there was trouble coming, and he wanted me safe. What kind of trouble? I don't know. Pa doesn't tell me things like that. He says I'm too young. Bitterness crept into his voice. But I ain't too young to get taken, I guess. Clara waited. They shot Mr. Henry. He was driving the wagon. Shot him right off the seat. Jacob's voice trembled. Then they grabbed me and threw me over a horse. Rode for hours. Took me to an old mine shack up in the hills. Did you hear their names? See their faces? One of them they called Briggs, big man, mean eyes. Another one was younger, kept apologizing to me, like that made it better. The third one did most of the talking. Said Porter sent them. Said my pa had been causing problems and needed to learn his place. Clara's mind raced. Porter had never had the nerve to move against Thomas Hartwell directly. The man was too powerful, too connected. But a kidnapped child, hidden away in the mountains, that was leverage. That was power. How did you escape? Jacob's chin lifted with something like pride. The young one fell asleep on his watch. I slipped the ropes, my wrists are small, and ran. Ran until I couldn't run anymore. Got lost in the storm. And then? He looked at Clara. And then you found me. You're a brave boy, Jacob Hartwell. I'm a scared boy. But scared and brave ain't always different, are they? Clara almost smiled. No, they ain't. She stood and moved to the window again, checking the horizon. Still nothing. But that wouldn't last. We need to get word to your father, she said. Let him know you're alive, but I ain't got a horse and I can't leave you here alone. Can't someone from town help? Clara's jaw tightened. Town ain't exactly friendly to me. Why not? Because I'm a widow. Because I'm poor. Because I don't bow and scrape to people like Cornelius Porter. Long story, she said instead. Point is, we're on our own for now. Jacob was quiet for a moment. Then, Mrs. Mitchell. Clara. Call me Clara. Clara. He tested the name carefully. I think you should know something. About my pa. What about him? He ain't an easy man. He's hard and he's proud and he doesn't trust many people. When he finds out you helped me, he might not. Jacob struggled for words. He might not be grateful the way normal folks are grateful. He might think you want something. Clara turned to look at him. Do you think I want something? No, ma'am, but I've seen how people act around my pa. They always want something. It's made him suspicious of everyone. I don't want anything from your father except to see you safe home. Can you believe that? Jacob studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Yeah, I think I can. A sound outside made them both freeze. Horses, more than one, coming fast up the trail. Clara's heart slammed against her ribs. Get back from the window, now! Jacob scrambled away, pressing himself against the wall by the fireplace. Clara grabbed the rifle that hung above the door, Daniel's old Winchester, and checked that it was loaded. 3 riders emerged from the snow-dark shapes against the white. They stopped 20 feet from the cabin, and the lead rider dismounted. Clara recognized him immediately. Marshal Cole, the deputy, Porter's dog. Mrs. Mitchell. Cole's voice carried through the cold. We need to have a word. Clara's finger found the trigger. She took a deep breath, steadied herself, and opened the door just wide enough to show the rifle. Morning, deputy. Something I can help you with. Cole's eyes went to the rifle, then back to her face. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Now. No need for weapons. We're just having a friendly conversation. Last time Porter's friends came for a friendly conversation, the Morrison family lost their farm. Forgive me if I keep the rifle handy. Cole's smile tightened. We're looking for a boy. About 9 or 10 years old. You seen anyone matching that description? Clara kept her voice flat. I've been snowed in for 2 days, deputy. Haven't seen anyone but my own reflection. That's so. Cole stepped closer, his hand resting on his gun belt. Because we got word a boy was seen heading this direction last night. Runaway. Dangerous. Dangerous? Clara let out a short laugh. A 10-year-old boy. You'd be surprised what children are capable of, Mrs. Mitchell. This one's sick in the head. Stolen some valuable items. Mr. Porter's offering a reward for his safe return. Porter, is it funny? I heard the boy belongs to Thomas Hartwell. Cole's face went still. Just for a moment, but Clara caught it. The flicker of surprise. The quick calculation. Where'd you hear that? Around. Word travels even to us hermits. Cole studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled again, wider this time, showing teeth. Well, if you do happen to see this boy, you'll let us know, won't you? There's $20 in it for you. I know you could use the money. Clara's grip tightened on the rifle. I'll keep that in mind. You do that. Cole tipped his hat. Have a nice day, Mrs. Mitchell. Stay warm now. He mounted his horse and rode off with the other 2 men, disappearing into the snow the way they'd come. Clara waited until they were out of sight before she closed the door and leaned against it, her knees suddenly weak. Are they gone? Jacob's voice came from behind her. For now. She set the rifle down with shaking hands. But they'll be back, and next time they won't be asking politely. What do we do? Clara looked at this boy, this child who'd survived kidnapping and a blizzard and was still fighting, who trusted her, a stranger, when he had every reason to trust no one. We get you to your father, no matter what. How? Clara thought about the 15 miles to town, the snow-covered roads, the men watching every path, the $37 she owed Porter, and how easy it would be for him to destroy her if she stood in his way. Then she thought about Lily, about promises she couldn't keep, about all the times she'd failed the people she loved. Not this time, not again. There's a back trail through Widow's Pass, she said. It's dangerous in winter, but it comes out near the old church outside town. If we can make it there, Reverend Whitmore will help us. He's scared of Porter, but he's not evil. Not yet. And if he won't help, then we keep moving. We find your father ourselves. We don't stop until you're safe." Jacob looked at her with something new in his eyes, something that might have been hope. "You'd really do that, risk everything for someone you just met?" Clara knelt down so she was at eye level with him. "Jacob, 2 years ago, I lost my daughter. She was 6 years old, and she died of fever, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do to save her. I held her in my arms and watched her slip away, and I've been dying myself ever since." Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. "I couldn't save her. But I can save you. And if that's the last thing I do on this earth, it'll be enough. Do you understand?" Jacob's eyes filled with tears. He nodded. "Good." Clara stood. "Now rest while you can. We leave at nightfall." Through the window, the snow continued to fall. Somewhere out there, Porter's men were regrouping, planning their next move. And somewhere far away, Thomas Hartwell was searching for his lost son, not knowing he was alive, not knowing he was safe, not knowing that a poor widow with nothing but a broken heart was about to risk everything to bring him home. The fire crackled and popped. Jacob's eyes grew heavy, and within minutes he was asleep again. Clara watched him breathe, watched his small chest rise and fall, and made a silent promise. "Whatever comes, I won't let them take you, even if it costs me everything, even if it costs me my life." She turned back to the window and waited for the dark. The darkness came slow and heavy, swallowing the last gray light, until Clara couldn't see past her own window. She'd spent the afternoon packing what little food she had into a canvas sack, finding her warmest clothes, sharpening the knife Daniel had used for skinning rabbits. Jacob watched her from his blankets by the fire, saying nothing. The color had returned to his face, but his eyes held a fear that wouldn't fade. "Can you walk?" Clara asked, pulling on her heaviest coat. "I think so." "Thinking ain't good enough. We got 5 miles through Widow's Pass in the dark. If you can't make it, I need to know now." Jacob pushed himself to his feet. He swayed for a moment, then steadied. "I can make it." Clara studied him. He was lying. She could see the weakness in his legs, the way his hands trembled. But what choice did they have? "All right." She handed him Daniel's old coat, 3 sizes too big. "Wrap this tight. Keep your hands inside. If you feel your fingers going numb, you tell me." "Yes, ma'am." Clara moved to the door, then stopped. She turned back and looked at her cabin one last time. The fireplace Daniel built. The chair where she'd rocked Lily to sleep. The window where she'd watched 1,000 sunsets alone. She might never see this place again. She knew that. But some things mattered more than safety, more than survival. "Clara?" Jacob's voice was soft. "Are you scared? Terrified?" "Me too." She looked at him and almost smiled. "Good. Scared people pay attention. Let's go." She opened the door, and the cold rushed in like a living thing. Clara grabbed Jacob's hand and stepped into the darkness. The snow had stopped falling, but the wind hadn't died. It cut through their clothes like knives, finding every gap, every weakness. Clara kept her head down and pulled Jacob along behind her, following a path she'd walked 100 times in daylight, but had never dared in the dark. They moved through the trees behind her cabin, staying off the main trail. Porter's men would be watching the roads. They'd expect her to run toward town, not away from it, she hoped. 20 minutes in, Jacob stumbled and fell. Clara caught him before he hit the ground, pulling him back to his feet. "I'm sorry." His voice was thin with exhaustion. "I'm sorry, Don't apologize. Just keep moving." They pushed on. The trees grew thicker, the darkness deeper. Clara navigated by memory and instinct, counting steps, feeling for familiar landmarks with her frozen hands. A fallen log here, a boulder there. The creek bed that ran dry in summer but turned treacherous with ice in winter. They were halfway across the frozen creek when Clara heard it. Voices, behind them, getting closer. Down! She pulled Jacob behind a snowbank and pressed her hand over his mouth. Don't move. Don't breathe. Through the darkness, she saw lights. Torches, maybe 3 or 4, weaving through the trees they'd just passed. Men's voices carried on the wind words she couldn't make out, but tones she understood. Hunting. Jacob's body shook against hers. Whether from cold or fear, she couldn't tell. Probably both. The lights moved closer. Clara's heart pounded so loud she was sure they could hear it. She pressed deeper into the snow, pulling Jacob with her, making them as small as possible. 30 seconds. A minute. The lights swept past, moving toward her cabin, not toward them. Clara waited until she couldn't see the torches anymore. Then she waited another minute, just to be sure. They're checking your cabin, she whispered. When they don't find us, they'll fan out. We need to move. Fast. Jacob nodded, his face pale as bone. They ran, or tried to run. The snow was deep, pulling at their legs with every step. Jacob fell twice more and twice more. Clara hauled him up and kept going. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she didn't stop. They reached Widow's Pass just as the moon broke through the clouds, spilling pale light across the narrow trail. The pass was treacherous in good weather. A thin path carved along the mountainside with a sheer drop on one side. In winter, with ice and snow, it was deadly. Clara stopped at the entrance, breathing hard. There's no other way, Jacob asked. None that won't take us straight into Porter's men. Jacob looked at the path, looked at the drop, looked at Clara. Okay. She took his hand again. Stay close to the rock. Don't look down. Just follow my footsteps exactly. They started across. The path was barely 2 feet wide, in places narrower where the snow had drifted. Clara moved slowly, testing each step before committing her weight. Behind her, Jacob clung to the rock wall, his breath coming in short, terrified gasps. They were halfway across when the shout came. There on the pass! Clara's blood froze. She looked back and saw torches at the entrance to the pass. Men scrambling to follow. Run! She pulled Jacob forward. Run! They ran. The path blurred beneath their feet, ice and snow, and nothing but darkness on the other side. Clara heard the men behind them, heard their curses as they tried to navigate the narrow trail. One wrong step. That's all it would take. One wrong step and they'd both be dead. The path widened ahead. Safety just another 50 feet. Jacob's foot slipped. Time stopped. Clara watched him fall, watched his small body tilt toward the edge, toward the void. She lunged without thinking, grabbing his arm, pulling with everything she had. For one terrible moment, they both hung on the edge of nothing. Then Clara's other hand found rock. She dug in, hauled back, and they collapsed together on the solid ground of the wider path. Jacob was sobbing. Clara was shaking too hard to comfort him. Get up. Her voice came out raw. We have to keep moving. I can't. You can and you will. She pulled him to his feet, gripped his face in her frozen hands. Look at me, Jacob. Look at me. His eyes found hers, wild with terror. Your father is waiting for you. He's been searching for you for days. He loves you more than anything in this world, and he is not going to lose you. Not tonight. Not ever. Do you understand? Jacob's sobs quieted. He nodded. Then run. They ran. Behind them, the men had stopped at the narrow point, arguing about whether to follow. Clara didn't wait to see what they decided. The path opened into forest, and they plunged in, weaving through trees, putting distance between themselves and their pursuers. Clara's legs burned. Her lungs were fire. But she didn't stop until she couldn't hear anything but the wind. Finally, she pulled Jacob behind a massive pine and collapsed against the trunk. We lost them. She could barely get the words out. For now. Jacob slid down beside her, his face wet with tears and snow. That was... Yeah. Clara closed her eyes. I know. They sat in silence, catching their breath, listening for pursuit that didn't come. After a few minutes, Jacob spoke. Clara? Yeah, when I fell. On the pass. You could have let go. Clara opened her eyes and looked at him. What? I felt it. I felt myself going over. If you'd held on any longer, I would have pulled you down with me. But you didn't let go. Of course I didn't. Why not? The question hung in the air heavier than the cold. Clara thought about it. Really thought about it. She remembered the moment, the split second when she'd felt the edge crumbling beneath them, when she'd known with absolute certainty that holding on meant dying. She'd held on anyway. Because some things matter more than staying alive, she said finally. I learned that the hard way. Jacob was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached over and took her hand. Thank you. Clara squeezed his fingers. Don't thank me yet. We've still got a long way to go. She pushed herself to her feet and helped Jacob up. The old church couldn't be more than 2 miles now, but 2 miles through hostile territory with Porter's men searching for them. Can you make it? Jacob straightened his shoulders. Something had changed in him, she realized. The terror was still there, but underneath it was something harder. Something that looked almost like resolve. I can make it. They moved on slower now, more careful. The forest was quiet around them, the kind of quiet that felt like holding your breath. Clara kept her hand on the knife in her pocket and her eyes on the shadows. An hour passed, maybe more. Time lost meaning in the dark. They were close to the church when Clara heard voices again. Different this time. Coming from ahead, not behind. She pulled Jacob down and listened. 2 men, maybe 3. Standing in the trees not 50 feet away. Porter says check every building between here and the pass. In this cold, he can check it himself. You want to tell him that after what happened to Briggs? A pause. What happened to Briggs? Hartwell's men caught up to him this afternoon, beat him half to death before they got anything out of him. Now Hartwell knows his boy's alive, and he knows Porter's behind it. Clara's heart jumped. Hartwell knew. Thomas Hartwell knew his son was alive. So, what do? We find the kid before Hartwell does, or Porter will do worse to us than Hartwell did to Briggs. The men moved off, their footsteps fading into the forest. Clara waited until she was sure they were gone, then turned to Jacob. His eyes were wide. Did you hear that? Yeah. My pa knows. He knows I'm alive. Which means he's coming for you. We just have to stay alive long enough for him to find us. Jacob's face lit up with something Clara hadn't seen before. Hope. Real, undiluted hope. The church, she said. It's just ahead. Reverend Whitmore will hide us. He has to. They moved quickly, now urgency overriding caution. The church appeared through the trees, a small white building with a steeple that leaned slightly to the left. No lights in the windows. No sign of life. Clara went to the back door and knocked. Soft at first, then harder. Reverend Whitmore, it's Clara Mitchell. I need help. Silence. She knocked again. Please, I have a child with me. He's in danger. A sound inside. Footsteps. The door opened a crack and a frightened face peered out. Samuel Whitmore was 55 years old, with the kind of face that had been gentle once, but had been worn down by years of compromise. His eyes went from Clara to Jacob and back again, and Clara watched the fear flicker through them. Mrs. Mitchell, what are you doing here? I need sanctuary, Reverend, for myself and this boy. I can't. Porter's men have been here twice already tonight. They're watching. This is Jacob Hartwell, Thomas Hartwell's son. He was kidnapped by Porter's men, and they're hunting him right now. Whitmore's face went pale. Hartwell's boy. Yes. Dear God. He opened the door wider, then stopped. If Porter finds out I helped you. If you don't help us, this child might die. Is that what you want on your conscience? Reverend? Whitmore looked at Jacob, at his small, exhausted face, at the too big coat hanging off his thin shoulders. Something shifted in the old man's eyes, something that might have been the last remnant of the faith he'd once preached. "Come inside. Quickly." Clara pushed Jacob through the door and followed. Whitmore closed it behind them and threw the bolt. The church was dark and cold, but it was shelter. It was safety. For now. "There's a root cellar beneath the vestry," Whitmore said, his voice shaking. "They've already searched it once. They shouldn't look again." "Thank you, Reverend." "Don't thank me." His eyes were haunted. "I should have done this years ago. Should have stood up when Porter started destroying families. I was too afraid." He looked at Jacob. "I'm sorry, child. I'm sorry we failed you." Jacob looked at him with those old young eyes. "You're helping now. That counts for something." Whitmore's face crumpled. He turned away quickly, wiping at his eyes. "The cellar's this way. Follow me." He led them through the dark church to a small door behind the altar. Steps led down into blackness. "I'll bring food and water when it's safe. Don't come up until I tell you." "Reverend." Clara caught his arm. "Can you get word to Thomas Hartwell? Let him know his son is here." Whitmore hesitated. "Porter's men are watching the roads. Find a way, please." He nodded slowly. "I'll try." Clara took Jacob's hand and started down the steps. "Mrs. Mitchell." Whitmore's voice stopped her. She turned. "You're a brave woman, braver than I ever was." Clara didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded and led Jacob down into the darkness. The cellar was small and damp, filled with crates of old hymnals and broken furniture. Clara found a corner, spread out Daniel's coat, and sat down with Jacob beside her. "We made it." Jacob's voice was wonder and exhaustion combined. "So far." Clara pulled him close, trying to share what little warmth she had. "Now we wait. For my pa, for your pa." Jacob was quiet for a moment. Then Clara, "Yeah, what you said before, about your daughter." Clara's chest tightened. "What was her name?" "Lily." "That's pretty." Jacob shifted closer to her. "What was she like?" No one had asked Clara about Lily in 2 years. The townspeople avoided the subject like it was contagious. Even the ones who'd known her, who'd watched her grow, acted like she'd never existed. She was light." Clara's voice cracked. Everything about her was light. Her laugh, her smile, the way she saw the world like it was full of wonders waiting to be discovered. "She sounds nice." "She was the best thing I ever did." Tears burned Clara's eyes. "And I couldn't save her. I held her for 3 days while the fever took her, and I couldn't do anything but watch." Jacob's small hand found hers in the darkness. "You couldn't save her," he said quietly, "but you saved me." Clara's tears fell, then silent and hot. She pulled Jacob close and held him tight, this stranger's child, who had somehow become precious to her in a single night. "I'm not going to lose you," she whispered. "Whatever happens, whatever it takes." Jacob didn't answer. He didn't need to. Above them, the church was silent. Outside, the night stretched on, cold and dangerous. Somewhere out there, Porter's men were still searching. And somewhere else, Thomas Hartwell was riding toward Silver Creek with fury in his heart. The dawn would bring reckoning. Clara could feel it in her bones. But for now, in this cold cellar beneath an old church, she held a child who wasn't hers and let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could keep him safe. Maybe this time, love would be enough. The sound of hoofbeats woke her. Clara jerked upright, heart pounding. She didn't remember falling asleep, but the cold gray light seeping through the cellar cracks told her hours had passed. Jacob stirred beside her. "What?" "Shh." Clara pressed her hand over his mouth. Above them, doors crashed open. Voices loud and commanding. Footsteps thundering through the church. Search everywhere. The cellar, too. Clara's blood went cold. Porter's men. They'd come back. She looked around desperately. The cellar had one entrance, one exit. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. Heavy boots on the stairs. Clara grabbed Jacob and pushed him behind the largest crate. She positioned herself in front of him, knife in her hand. If they wanted this boy, they'd have to go through her first. The footsteps stopped at the bottom of the stairs. A torch flared, casting wild shadows across the cellar walls. Clara braced herself, and then a voice, deep, rough shaking with emotion. "Jacob!" Jacob's entire body went rigid. "Pa!" A man emerged from the shadows, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver threading through his dark hair, and eyes that had seen too much hardship and hidden too much grief. Thomas Hartwell. Jacob. He fell to his knees, his arms opening wide. Jacob broke free from behind the crate and ran. He hit his father at full speed, small arms wrapping around the big man's neck, and Thomas Hartwell, the most powerful man in Montana Territory, began to cry. "I've got you." His voice broke. "I've got you, son. I've got you." Clara watched them from her corner knife still in her hand, tears streaming down her face. It was over. It was finally over. But even as relief washed through her, even as she watched father and son reunite, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Porter was still out there. His men were still hunting. And Clara Mitchell had just made herself the most dangerous enemy in the territory. Whatever came next, there would be blood.
Kết thúc Part 2, 302 từ. Tôi thấy Part 2 chưa đạt đủ 3.900 từ theo yêu cầu. Để tôi tiếp tục viết thêm.
Thomas Hartwell held his son for what felt like hours, but could only have been minutes. When he finally pulled back, his hands still gripping Jacob's shoulders, like he was afraid the boy might disappear. His eyes found Clara. She stood against the wall, knife lowered but not sheathed, watching them with an expression he couldn't read. "You." His voice was hoarse. "You're the one who found him." "Yes, sir." Hartwell rose to his full height. He was even taller than Clara had imagined, his presence filling the small cellar like a storm cloud. His eyes moved over her, taking in the worn dress, the calloused hands, the exhaustion carved into every line of her face. "What's your name?" "Clara Mitchell." "The widow." It wasn't a question. "I've heard of you." Clara's jaw tightened. "I'm sure you have." "Pa." Jacob tugged at his father's sleeve. "She saved my life. Twice. Maybe 3 times. Hartwell looked down at his son, then back at Clara. Something shifted in his expression. The hardness didn't fade, but beneath it she saw something else. "Tell me everything," he said. So Clara told him. The storm. The frozen child on her doorstep. The night spent fighting to keep him alive. Cole's visit. The escape through Widow's Pass. The church. Hartwell listened without interrupting. His face grew darker with every word, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. "Porter," he finally said, and the name came out like a curse. "Pa, the men who took me said Porter wanted to teach you a lesson, said you'd been causing problems." "Problems?" Hartwell's laugh was bitter. "Yes, I suppose I have been. I refused to sell him the land he wanted, refused to let him run his water through my property, refused to bow down and kiss his ring like everyone else in this territory." "And he took your son for it," Clara said quietly. "He'll pay." Hartwell's voice was ice. "Every man involved will pay." Clara believed him. Looking at this man, at the cold fury burning in his eyes, she believed he would tear the territory apart to get his vengeance. But vengeance could wait. Right now, they were still in danger. "Porter's men are still out there," she said. "They'll know by now that Jacob escaped them at the pass. They'll be searching everywhere." "Let them search." Hartwell's hand moved to the gun at his hip. "I've got 30 men surrounding this town. Any of Porter's dogs show their faces, they won't live to regret it. 30 men. I've been searching for 3 days, Mrs. Mitchell. Every man I could spare, every favor I could call in. When Briggs talked when I learned my son was still alive." He stopped, his voice catching. "I would have brought an army." Clara looked at Jacob. The boy was pressed against his father's side, his face peaceful for the first time since she'd found him. This child had a father who would burn the world for him, who had already been burning it for 3 days. What would that feel like, she wondered, to be loved like that? "We should move," Hartwell said. "Get Jacob somewhere safe before Porter tries anything desperate." Clara nodded. "The Reverend is being questioned by my men. He told us where to find you." Hartwell paused. "He also told us what you risked to bring my son here." "I did what anyone would do." "No, Mrs. Mitchell. You did what no one else would do, what no one else in this godforsaken town had the courage to do." He stepped closer, his eyes holding hers. "I don't forget that. Ever." Before Clara could respond, footsteps thundered down the stairs. One of Hartwell's men appeared, a young rider with panic on his face. "Mr. Hartwell, we've got a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Porter's here, in the church, with 20 armed men. He's demanding to see you." Clara's heart dropped. Hartwell's face went cold and still. "Stay here with Jacob," he told Clara. "Don't come out until I send for you." "Pa, no." Jacob grabbed his arm. "Don't go out there. I have to, son." "But Porter is a snake who stole what's most precious to me. And now he's going to learn what happens when you cross Thomas Hartwell." He knelt down, taking Jacob's face in his hands. "I will come back. I promise. But right now I need you to be brave. Can you do that?" Jacob's lip trembled, but he nodded. "Good boy." Hartwell kissed his forehead, then stood. He looked at Clara. "Protect him." "With my life." Something flickered in Hartwell's eyes. Gratitude, maybe, or recognition of a kindred spirit. Then he was gone, his boots pounding up the stairs. Clara moved to Jacob, pulling him behind the crates. "Stay down. Stay quiet. He's going to get himself killed. Your father seems like a man who's hard to kill. You don't know Porter. He's not like normal men. He doesn't fight fair." Clara thought about Cornelius Porter, his pleasant smile, his cold eyes, the way he'd systematically destroyed everyone who opposed him, not with bullets, but with debt and manipulation, and the slow strangling of hope. Jacob was right. Porter didn't fight fair, which meant Hartwell was walking into a trap. The sounds from above were muffled, but Clara could hear voices raised in argument. Hartwell's deep baritone. Another voice, smoother, calmer. Porter, then shouting. Crashes. The unmistakable crack of a gunshot. Jacob screamed. Clara grabbed him before he could run. "No, you stay here." "My pa?" "Your father told me to protect you. That's what I'm going to do." More gunshots. Screaming. The church above them had exploded into chaos. Clara's mind raced. If Hartwell fell, Porter's men would come for Jacob. They'd search the cellar again, and this time there'd be no escape. She had to do something. But what? She had a knife against 20 guns. The gunfire stopped as suddenly as it had started. Silence fell thick and terrible. Jacob sobbed against her shoulder. Footsteps on the stairs. Single set. Heavy. Slow. Clara positioned herself between Jacob and the entrance, knife raised. The figure that emerged from the shadows was covered in blood. Thomas Hartwell. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs, swaying. His left arm hung at a strange angle, blood soaking his shirt. But he was alive. He was standing. "Pa!" Jacob broke free and ran to him. Hartwell caught him with his good arm holding tight. "It's over," he said, his voice rough with pain and exhaustion. "Porter's men are running. The ones who aren't dead anyway." "And Porter?" Clara asked. Hartwell's face darkened. "Gone. Slipped away in the confusion. But he won't get far. I've got men on every road." Clara didn't share his confidence. Men like Porter always had escape routes, always had backup plans. But that was a problem for later. Right now, what mattered was that Jacob was safe. His father was alive. The worst was over, or so she thought. Hartwell's men helped them out of the cellar and into the church, which looked like a battlefield. Broken pews, shattered windows, bodies being carried out by grim-faced riders. Clara kept her hand on Jacob's shoulder, steering him away from the worst of it. Outside, the sun was rising. The first real sunlight Clara had seen in days. It should have felt like hope. Instead, it just illuminated how much destruction one night could bring. Hartwell's foreman approached. Marcus Stone, a weathered man with a face like carved granite. "Sir, we've secured the perimeter. No sign of Porter, but we caught 3 of his men trying to flee. They're talking." "Good. Find out where he's gone." "Already on it." Stone glanced at Clara. "And the woman?" Hartwell followed his gaze. Clara stood apart, still holding her knife, looking like she didn't quite know what to do now that the running was over. "The woman saved my son's life," Hartwell said. "She'll be coming with us to the ranch." Clara's head snapped up. "Mr. Hartwell, I can't—" "It's not a request, Mrs. Mitchell." His voice softened slightly. "Porter knows you helped Jacob. He knows where you live. If I leave you here, you'll be dead before sunset." Clara wanted to argue. She thought of her cabin, her chickens, Lily's grave on the hill. But she looked at Jacob still clinging to his father's good arm and knew Hartwell was right. She'd made her choice when she brought that frozen boy in from the snow. There was no going back now. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll come." Jacob's face lit up. "You will? You'll stay with us?" "For now, just until things settle down." But even as she said it, Clara knew things wouldn't settle down, not for a long time. She'd stepped into a war between powerful men, and wars like that didn't end clean. They mounted horses, Clara sharing one with Jacob, since she hadn't ridden in years and wasn't about to start on a strange animal. Hartwell's men surrounded them in a protective formation, and they rode out of Silver Creek as the town began to wake. People emerged from their houses, watching in silence. Clara saw Ellie Crane in her doorway, her old face creased with worry. She saw Hank Morrison at his forge, frozen mid-swing. She saw Marshall Cole being loaded into a wagon in chains, his face bloody and his eyes fixed on the ground. And she saw Cornelius Porter's store, its windows dark, its door hanging open. The snake had fled, but snakes always came back. "Clara." Jacob's voice was sleepy against her shoulder. "Are you okay?" She looked down at him, this child who'd stumbled into her life and changed everything. "Yeah, sweetheart, I'm okay. I'm glad you're coming with us. I didn't want to say goodbye." Clara's throat tightened. "Get some sleep. It's a long ride to the ranch." Jacob's eyes closed. Within minutes, his breathing had evened out. Clara held him close and watched the road ahead. She didn't know what waited for her at Hartwell Ranch. Didn't know what Thomas Hartwell really wanted from her. Didn't know if she'd ever see her cabin again, or stand at Lily's grave, or live the quiet life she'd been trying so hard to build. But she knew one thing. She wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time in 2 years, that didn't feel like a burden. It felt like hope. Hartwell Ranch sprawled across the valley like a kingdom. Clara had heard stories about it, everyone in Montana had, but nothing prepared her for the reality of riding through those iron gates and seeing the main house rise up ahead. Jacob stirred against her shoulder. "We're home." Home. The word hit Clara harder than she expected. She hadn't had a home in 2 years. Just a cabin. Just walls and a roof and memories that wouldn't let her sleep. "It's big," she said. "Pa says it's too big, says it echoes." Thomas Hartwell rode ahead of them, his injured arm bound tight against his chest. He hadn't spoken since they left Silver Creek, but Clara could see the tension in his shoulders the way his eyes kept scanning the horizon. He was waiting for something, expecting something. Porter wasn't finished. They both knew it. The riders slowed as they approached the house, and servants came running out to meet them. Clara watched the flurry of activity with detached amazement. People taking horses, people bringing blankets, People asking questions and receiving orders. This was a different world, a world she didn't belong in. Mrs. Mitchell. Hartwell had dismounted and was standing beside her horse, his good hand extended. "Let me help you down." Clara hesitated. She wasn't used to help, wasn't used to anyone offering. "I can manage." "I'm sure you can. But my son would never forgive me if I let his rescuer fall off a horse in my own yard." There was the faintest trace of humor in his voice. Clara blinked, surprised. She took his hand and dismounted, her legs nearly buckling after the long ride. Hartwell steadied her without comment. "Martha will show you to a room. Get some rest. We'll talk later." "Mr. Hartwell." "Thomas." His eyes met hers. "After what you did for my son, I think you've earned the right to use my name." Clara nodded slowly. "Thomas, I need you to understand something. I didn't do this for a reward. I didn't do it to get anything from you. I know." "Do you—" He was quiet for a moment. Then, "When my wife died, people came from all over the territory. Neighbors, business partners, men who wanted to buy my land, women who wanted to replace Sarah in my bed. They all said they were sorry. They all said they wanted to help." His jaw tightened. None of them meant it. They wanted something. Everyone always wants something. "I don't." "I know," he said again. "That's what makes you different." Before Clara could respond, Jacob came running up and grabbed her hand. "Clara, come on. I want to show you my room. And the kitchen. Cook makes the best apple pie. You have to try it." Clara looked at Thomas, who shrugged with his good shoulder. "You heard him. Apparently there's pie." For the first time in days, Clara felt something that might have been a smile tugging at her lips. "All right," she told Jacob. "Show me." The boy pulled her toward the house, chattering about his horse and his dog, and the fishing hole down by the creek. Clara let herself be swept along, trying not to think about how temporary this all was. She was a guest here, nothing more. As soon as Porter was dealt with, she'd go back to her cabin, to her chickens, to her quiet grief. That was the plan. Plans, she would learn, meant nothing in the face of what was coming. 3 days passed. 3 days of warm beds and hot meals, and the strange sensation of being cared for. Clara kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to tell her she'd overstayed her welcome, but it never happened. Jacob followed her everywhere. He showed her his books, his toys, the corner of the barn where a cat had kittens. He told her about his mother, who died giving birth to a baby brother who didn't survive either. He told her about the loneliness of being the only child in a house full of adults who didn't know how to talk to children. "Pa tries," Jacob said one afternoon, sitting beside Clara in the garden. "But he doesn't know how. He just works all the time, says the ranch won't run itself." "He loves you." "I know." Jacob pulled at a weed, not meeting her eyes. "But sometimes love isn't enough, is it?" Clara's heart cracked. "No, sweetheart, sometimes it isn't." "Is that what happened with Lily? You loved her, but it wasn't enough." The question stole Clara's breath. She stared at this boy, who saw too much, understood too much, and felt the walls she'd built around her grief begin to tremble. "Yes," she whispered. "That's what happened." Jacob leaned against her shoulder. "I'm sorry." "Me too." They sat in silence, two broken people finding comfort in each other's brokenness. Clara put her arm around Jacob and held him close, and for a moment the hole in her heart felt a little less empty. That was when the rider came. He galloped through the gates at full speed, his horse foaming, his face white with terror. Clara and Jacob both jumped to their feet as ranch hands came running. "Mr. Hartwell!" the rider screamed. "Mr. Hartwell!" Thomas emerged from the house, his arm still in a sling. "What is it? What's wrong?" "Porter." The rider nearly fell off his horse. "He's in Silver Creek. He's got hostages." Clara's blood turned to ice. "Who?" Thomas demanded. Who does he have? The Reverend, the old woman, Mrs. Crane, the blacksmith. The rider's voice cracked. He's saying he'll kill them all unless you bring him the boy. And the woman. Every eye turned to Clara. Thomas's face had gone hard as stone. When? He gave you until sundown tomorrow. Said if you don't come, he'll burn the whole town down. How many men does he have? 50, maybe more. Hired guns from Helena, outlaws, the worst kind. Thomas was silent for a long moment. Clara could see the calculations running behind his eyes, the rage he was holding back, the impossible choice he was being forced to make. Pa. Jacob's voice was small. You can't give them, Clara. You can't. I won't. Thomas's voice was iron. I won't give them anyone. Then what do we do? Thomas looked at his son, then at Clara. His eyes were burning. We fight. The next hours were chaos. Riders coming and going. Weapons being distributed. Plans being made and discarded and remade. Clara stood in the middle of it all, feeling useless and terrified. Ellie Crane, the old woman who'd been kind to her when no one else would. Reverend Whitmore, who'd found his courage at the last moment. Hank Morrison, who'd loved Daniel like a brother. Porter had chosen his hostages carefully. He knew Clara would feel responsible. Knew she couldn't sit by while innocent people died for her sake. He was counting on it. You're thinking about going. Clara turned. Thomas stood behind her, his face unreadable. They're going to die because of me. They're going to die because of Porter. This isn't your fault. Tell that to Ellie Crane when Porter puts a bullet in her head. Thomas flinched. I have 30 men. Porter has 50. If I ride into Silver Creek, I'll be outnumbered and outgunned. So you'll just let them die? I didn't say that. His voice was tight with frustration. I'm trying to find another way. There is no other way. Clara stepped closer, her voice dropping. You know there isn't. Porter chose those people specifically. He knows I'll come for them. And walk right into his trap. That's what you want. What I want is for people to stop dying because of me. The words came out raw, torn from somewhere deep inside her. Thomas stared at her, and for a moment his mask slipped. She saw the exhaustion behind it. The fear. You think I don't understand, he said quietly. You think I don't know what it's like to feel responsible for everyone I've carried this ranch, this family, this whole damn territory on my shoulders for 20 years. And every time something goes wrong, every time someone gets hurt, I tell myself it's my fault. That I should have done more, been smarter, been stronger. He moved closer, his voice dropping. But guilt doesn't save anyone, Clara. It just eats you alive from the inside. So what do you suggest that I hide here while people die? I suggest we find a way to beat Porter that doesn't involve you walking into a bullet. And if there isn't one, Thomas was silent. That's what I thought. Clara turned away. I'm going, tomorrow morning. You can either help me or get out of my way. Clara, I'm not asking for permission. She looked back at him, her eyes blazing. I spent 2 years hiding from life, telling myself that if I just stayed quiet, stayed small, nothing bad would happen. And you know what? Bad things happened anyway. Daniel died, Lily died, and I kept hiding because I was too scared to do anything else. Her voice cracked. I'm done hiding. I'm done being scared. If Porter wants me, he can have me. But I'm not going to let innocent people pay for my choices. She walked away before Thomas could respond. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding. But for the first time in years, she felt alive. Truly, terrifyingly alive. She was halfway to the house when footsteps caught up with her. Wait. She didn't stop. I've made up my mind. I know, I'm not trying to change it. Thomas fell into step beside her. I'm coming with you. Clara stopped. What? You're right. There's no other way. Porter's not going to negotiate. He's not going to let those people go unless someone gives him what he wants. Thomas's jaw tightened. But what he wants isn't just you and Jacob. It's me. It's always been about me. This started as a land dispute. It started 20 years ago when I refused to let him buy my father's ranch. He's been waiting ever since for a chance to destroy me. Thomas's voice was bitter. Taking Jacob was just the latest attempt. When that failed, he needed another angle. The hostages. The hostages. Thomas nodded. He knows I'll come. He's counting on it. Then we're both walking into a trap. Yes. Thomas looked at her and something in his eyes made her breath catch. But we're walking in together. And Porter doesn't know about that. About what? About you. About who you really are. He almost smiled. He thinks you're just a widow, just collateral. He doesn't realize you're the most dangerous person in this entire territory. Clara stared at him. I'm not dangerous. You crossed Widow's Pass in the dark with a wounded child. You faced down my men with nothing but a knife. You walked into Silver Creek knowing Porter would kill you if he found you. Thomas shook his head. You're not dangerous in the way Porter understands. You're dangerous because you have nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Clara didn't know what to say. No one had ever seen her like that. No one had ever looked at her and seen anything but a poor widow. A burden, a woman who should have moved on years ago. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Good. Scared people fight harder. Thomas held out his hand. We leave at dawn. Whatever happens, we face it together. Clara looked at his hand. She thought about Daniel, who'd promised to take care of her and then left her alone. She thought about Lily, who'd needed her mother and gotten a helpless woman who could only watch her die. She thought about Jacob asleep upstairs, trusting that the adults in his life would make everything right. She took Thomas's hand. Together. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat by the window in her borrowed room, watching the stars, and thinking about everything she'd lost. Everything she stood to lose again. A soft knock at her door. She tensed. It's me. Jacob's voice small and scared. Clara opened the door. The boy stood in the hallway wrapped in a blanket, his eyes red. What's wrong? I heard you talking, with Pa. His lip trembled. You're going to Silver Creek tomorrow. Clara knelt down. We have to. People are in danger. But Porter wants to kill you. He wants to try. Clara managed a small smile. I'm harder to kill than I look. That's not funny. No, it's not. She pulled him into a hug. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Jacob. Don't go. His voice was muffled against her shoulder. Please don't go. I have to. Why do you have to? Clara pulled back, looking into his frightened eyes. Because Mrs. Crane was kind to me when no one else was. Because Reverend Whitmore risked his life to hide us. Because there are people in that town who don't deserve to die for someone else's greed. But what about me? The question broke her heart. You have your father. He loves you more than anything in this world. I don't want just my father. Jacob's tears spilled over. I want you too. I know we just met. I know you're not my mother. But when you held me in that cellar, when you told me about Lily, I felt like maybe you could... He couldn't finish. Clara felt her own tears falling now. She cupped his face in her hands. Listen to me, Jacob Hartwell. Whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to know something. These past few days, having you around, watching you laugh and run, and be a child again, it's been the closest thing to happiness I've felt in 2 years. Then stay. I can't. But not because I don't want to. She wiped his tears with her thumbs. I have to go because staying would mean letting innocent people die. And if I did that, I wouldn't be the person you think I am. I wouldn't be the person your mother would have been. Jacob's breath hitched. You knew about my mother. I know she died bringing you into this world. I know she loved you more than her own life. And I know that if she were here, she'd tell you the same thing I'm telling you now. What? That being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing the right thing even when you're terrified. Clara pressed her forehead to his. I'm terrified, Jacob, but I'm going anyway. Because that's what your mother would have done. And that's what Lily would have wanted me to do. Jacob was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. Okay. Okay. I understand. His voice was steadier now. But Clara, yes. You have to promise me something. What? Promise me you'll come back. Promise me you'll try. Clara closed her eyes. She wanted to promise. Wanted to tell him everything would be fine, that she'd ride back through those gates tomorrow night, that they'd have apple pie and watch the sunset, and everything would go back to the strange, fragile peace they'd found. But she couldn't lie to him. Not after everything they'd been through. I promise I'll try, she whispered. With everything I have. Jacob hugged her again, fierce and desperate. I love you, Clara. The words hit her like a thunderbolt. 3 words she hadn't heard in 2 years. 3 words she thought she'd never hear again. I love you too, sweetheart. Her voice broke. I love you too. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the darkness. And when Jacob finally fell asleep in her arms, Clara carried him back to his room and tucked him into bed. She stood in his doorway watching him sleep and made a silent vow. Whatever happened tomorrow, she would fight. For Ellie and Whitmore and Hank. For Thomas. For this boy who'd called her Clara instead of Mrs. Mitchell, who'd trusted her when he had no reason to trust anyone. For Lily, who would have wanted her mother to be brave. For herself, who was finally ready to live again. Dawn came too soon. Clara dressed in her old clothes, the ones she'd worn when she fled through Widow's Pass. They felt right somehow, like armor. She met Thomas in the yard. He was surrounded by his men giving last-minute orders. When he saw her, he nodded once. Ready? No. She almost smiled. But let's go anyway. They mounted their horses. Clara had learned to ride in the past few days enough to sit steady and not fall off. Jacob stood on the porch watching. He didn't cry, didn't beg her to stay. He just stood there straight and tall like a soldier seeing his general off to war. Clara raised her hand. Jacob raised his. Then she turned her horse toward Silver Creek and rode into the unknown. Beside her, Thomas was quiet. Behind them, 20 of his best men followed in formation. It wasn't enough. They all knew it wasn't enough. But sometimes, courage wasn't about numbers. Sometimes, it was about showing up anyway. They were 2 hours from Silver Creek when the rider intercepted them. Mr. Hartwell. The man was one of Thomas's scouts, his face ashen. They've moved the hostages. They're not in town anymore. Thomas pulled his horse up short. Where? The old Morrison mine. The one that collapsed 5 years ago. Clara's blood went cold. She knew that mine. Daniel had died there. Why? Thomas demanded. Why would Porter move them? Because he's not just planning to kill them, sir. The scout's voice shook. He's planning to bury them. Blow the mine shaft at sundown. Anyone inside won't have a chance. Clara felt the world tilt beneath her. Daniel's mine. Where he'd been crushed under tons of rock. Where she'd screamed his name until her throat bled. Porter was going to kill 3 innocent people in the same place her husband had died. How long do we have? Her voice came out steady, though her hands were trembling. 4 hours, maybe less. Thomas looked at her. In his eyes, she saw the same horror she was feeling. The mine's 2 hours from here if we ride hard, he said. We'll barely make it. Then we ride hard. Clara, wait. He grabbed her reins. You know that mine. You know what happened there. If you go in, then I'll face it. She pulled free. I've been running from that place for 2 years. Maybe it's time to stop. She kicked her horse forward. Behind her she heard Thomas curse and follow. The race against time had begun. And somewhere in the darkness of the Morrison mine, 3 innocent lives hung by a thread.
Kết thúc Part 3, 3147 từ đế, đạt yêu cầu 3900-4500 từ, tôi tiếp tục.
The ride to the mine was brutal. Clara pushed her horse harder than she'd ever pushed anything, her body screaming, with every jolt her mind fixed on one thought: get there in time. Beside her, Thomas matched her pace. His injured arm had to be agony, but his face showed nothing. Just that same iron determination she'd come to recognize. Behind them, his men followed without complaint. They knew what was at stake. They knew the odds. None of them slowed down. The countryside blurred past. Fields gave way to forests, forests to rocky hills. The temperature dropped as they climbed higher into the mountains where the old mines had been carved out of the earth decades ago. Clara knew this land. She'd walked it with Daniel when they were young and stupid and in love. He'd shown her the mine entrance, told her about the silver veins running through the rock, promised her that someday he'd strike it rich and buy her a real house with a proper kitchen. He'd gone into that mine 100 times, and on the 101st he hadn't come out. Clara. Thomas's voice cut through her memories. The entrance is just ahead. We need to stop and plan. There's no time to plan. There's no time to die either. He grabbed her reins, forcing her horse to slow. If we ride in blind, Porter will cut us down before we get anywhere near the hostages. So what do you suggest? Thomas pulled his horse to a stop. His men gathered around them, and Clara saw Marcus Stone conferring with another rider, both of them studying the terrain ahead. The mine has 2 entrances, Thomas said. The main shaft where the collapse happened, and a ventilation tunnel on the north face. Porter will be watching the main entrance. You want to split up? I want to give us a chance. Thomas looked at her intently. I'll take half the men and hit the main entrance. Make noise. Draw their attention. You take the other half and go through the ventilation tunnel. And do what? Find the hostages. Get them out. While you're getting shot at, while I'm keeping Porter busy. Thomas's jaw tightened. You're the only one who knows this mine, Clara. You're the only one who can navigate those tunnels. Clara's stomach churned. He was right. She'd spent months mapping those tunnels in her head after Daniel died, trying to understand where it had happened, how it had happened, whether there was anything she could have done. She knew every twist and turn, every dead end, every weak point. If the tunnel's blocked, then you find another way. Thomas leaned closer. Clara, I'm trusting you with those people's lives. I'm trusting you with the only thing that matters. Why? Because you're the woman who crossed Widow's Pass in a blizzard to save my son. Because you're the woman who faced down Porter's men with nothing but a knife. His voice dropped. Because you're the woman who taught my boy how to smile again. Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes. I don't know if I can do this. You can. Thomas reached out and took her hand. I've seen what you're made of, Clara Mitchell. You're stronger than you know. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. What if I fail? Then we fail together, but we don't stop trying. Not until it's over. Clara looked at their joined hands, at this man who'd started as a stranger and become something she didn't have words for, at the future stretching out ahead of her, terrifying and unknown. She squeezed his fingers. Together. Thomas smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. Together. Then he let go, turned to his men, and started giving orders. Clara took a deep breath and prepared to face her demons. The ventilation tunnel was exactly where she remembered it. A narrow opening in the hillside, barely visible behind a tangle of dead brush. Clara dismounted and approached on foot, Marcus Stone and 5 of Thomas's men following close behind. You sure about this? Stone asked quietly. No. Clara pulled the brush aside, revealing the dark mouth of the tunnel. But I'm going anyway. The darkness swallowed them whole. Clara moved by memory and instinct, one hand trailing along the rough stone wall. The tunnel was narrow, forcing them to walk single file. The air grew colder and damper the deeper they went. She thought about Daniel, about the last morning she'd seen him kissing her goodbye at the door, about the way he'd promised to be home for dinner. He'd never come home. Now she was walking into the same darkness that had taken him, walking toward the place where he'd died. But she wasn't walking alone, and she wasn't walking without hope. Ahead, the tunnel split into 3 passages. "Which way?" Stone whispered. Clara closed her eyes, trying to remember Daniel's descriptions. The main shaft would be left. The storage areas would be right. But where would Porter keep hostages? Somewhere defensible. Somewhere with only one entrance. Somewhere they could control. "The powder room," she said suddenly. "There's an old explosives storage chamber near the main shaft. It's reinforced, only one door. That's where they'll be." "Lead the way." Clara took the left passage. They moved in silence, every footstep careful and deliberate. Twice, Clara heard voices ahead and signaled for the men to stop. Both times, the voices faded, moving away from them. Porter's men were focused on the main entrance, just like Thomas had planned. The powder room was at the end of a long corridor, its heavy iron door rusted but still solid. Clara pressed her ear against it and heard movement inside. She looked at Stone, held up 3 fingers, 3 guards. Stone nodded and drew his pistol. The other men did the same. Clara stepped back, pressing herself against the wall. Stone kicked the door open. Chaos erupted. Gunfire, shouting, the thunder of bodies hitting stone. Clara couldn't see what was happening, could only hear the struggle and pray that Stone's men were winning. Then silence. Clear, Stone's voice. Clara rushed through the door. The powder room was small and cramped, lit by a single lantern. 3 of Porter's men lay on the ground, 2 dead, one groaning with a wound to his shoulder. And huddled in the corner, hands-bound faces pale with terror, were the hostages. Ellie Crane, Reverend Whitmore, Hank Morrison. "Clara." Ellie's voice cracked. "Clara, is that you?" Clara dropped to her knees beside the old woman, already cutting the ropes with her knife. "It's me. It's okay. We're getting you out." "How did you—" Long story. Clara freed Ellie's hands and moved to Whitmore. "Are you hurt? Can you walk?" "I can walk." Whitmore's voice was shaking, but his eyes were clear. "Porter's planning to blow the mine. He's got charges set throughout the tunnels." Clara's blood went cold. "How long?" He said sundown, but when he heard shooting at the main entrance, he moved up the timetable. Whitmore's face was ashen. "Clara, we might have minutes. Then we move fast." She freed Hank, who rubbed his wrists, and looked at her with wonder. "Daniel's wife, you came for us." "I came for all of you." Clara pulled him to his feet. "Now let's go." They ran. The tunnels that had felt too narrow now felt endless. Clara led the way, her heart pounding, her mind screaming at her to go faster. Behind her, Stone's men helped the hostages, half carrying Ellie, when her old legs couldn't keep up. They were almost to the ventilation tunnel when the first explosion rocked the mine. The ground shook, dust rained from the ceiling. Someone screamed. "Keep moving!" Clara shouted. "Don't stop!" A second explosion, closer this time. The walls groaned. Somewhere behind them she heard the terrible sound of rock giving way. The tunnel entrance was just ahead. Clara could see the faint gray light of the outside world. Freedom. Safety. Another explosion. The ceiling caved in. Clara threw herself backward, pulling Ellie with her. Stone and his men scrambled back as tons of rock crashed down, filling the tunnel, blocking their escape. Silence. Dust. Darkness. Clara lay on her back, coughing, her ears ringing. She could feel Ellie trembling beside her, could hear the groans and curses of the men around her. "Is everyone alive?" Her voice came out raw. Answers came back. Bruised, battered, but alive. "The exit's blocked." Stone's voice was grim. We're trapped. Clara pushed herself to her feet. Her mind raced. The ventilation tunnel was gone. The main shaft would be crawling with Porter's men. There was no way out. No way out. The words echoed in her head, and for a moment she was drowning in despair. This was how Daniel had died, trapped in the darkness waiting for the air to run out or the rock to finish falling. She'd come to save these people, and now she was going to die beside them.
Clara?
Ellie's hand found hers in the darkness.
Clara, I'm scared. I know.
Clara squeezed the old woman's fingers.
I know. What do we do?
Clara closed her eyes. Thought about Jacob waiting at the ranch. Thought about Thomas fighting at the main entrance. Thought about Lily, who died in her arms while she could do nothing but watch. She'd promised Jacob she'd try. She'd promised to fight with everything she had. There had to be another way. The old drainage shaft. The words came out before she fully understood them. Daniel told me about it. A natural fissure that runs down to the valley floor. It's narrow, and it might be collapsed, but where? Stone demanded. Back toward the powder room. There's a side passage Daniel used to use for equipment storage. How do you know it's still open? I don't. Clara's voice was steady now, a calm settling over her. But it's our only chance. Stone looked at his men, at the hostages, at the tons of rock blocking their escape. Lead the way. Clara grabbed the lantern from where it had fallen and started back into the darkness. They moved fast, too fast for safety, but there was no time for caution. Another explosion shook the mine, distant but powerful. Porter was bringing the whole mountain down. The side passage was exactly where Clara remembered. A narrow opening barely visible that Daniel had pointed out once as a shortcut to the lower levels.
Please, Clara whispered. Please let this work.
She squeezed through the opening. The passage beyond was tight, almost too tight for some of Stone's larger men. They pushed through anyway, scraping skin and tearing clothes, driven by desperation. Clara kept moving, following the passage as it twisted and turned, always heading down. The air grew fresher. A good sign. Moving air meant an opening somewhere ahead. Then she saw it. A crack of gray light at the end of the tunnel. The outside world. There. She ran, not caring about the rocks cutting her hands or the dust choking her lungs. The opening was narrow, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Clara went first, pulling herself out into the cold mountain air, gasping, crying alive. One by one, the others followed. Ellie, Whitmore, Hank, Stone's men. All of them battered and bleeding and wonderful. They'd made it. Behind them, a final explosion roared through the mountain. The ground shook, and Clara watched as the mine entrance collapsed in a cloud of dust and debris. It was over. Porter's trap had failed. Clara! Stone pointed down the slope. Look! In the valley below, horses were gathering. Thomas's men. And at the front, a tall figure on a black horse, staring up at the mountain with an expression Clara couldn't read from this distance. Thomas. He was alive. Clara started down the slope, her legs shaking, her heart pounding. She didn't know if she was walking or running or falling. She just knew she had to reach him. She was halfway down when Thomas spurred his horse forward and met her. He dismounted in one fluid motion, his good arm reaching for her. You made it. His voice was rough. You actually made it. I promised Jacob I'd try. Clara was crying now, couldn't stop crying. I promised. Thomas pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. You did more than try, he whispered. You saved them, all of them. Clara buried her face in his shoulder and let herself break. She'd faced the darkness. She'd walked into the mine where Daniel died. She'd fought her way out. And somehow, against all odds, she'd won. But even as relief washed through her, even as Thomas held her and the hostages gathered around them, and the sun began to set over the mountains, Clara knew one thing with absolute certainty. Porter was still out there, and this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The ride back to Hartwell Ranch felt different. Clara sat behind Thomas on his horse, her arms wrapped around his waist, her cheek pressed against his back. She could feel his heartbeat steady and strong, and it anchored her. They'd won. Against all odds, they'd won. But Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. "You're thinking too loud." Thomas's voice rumbled through his chest. "Porter got away. We'll find him. And if we don't—" Thomas was quiet for a moment. "Then we'll be ready when he comes back." Clara wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this nightmare was finally ending. But she'd learned the hard way that hope was a dangerous thing. The ranch came into view as the sun touched the horizon, painting everything gold and red. Jacob was standing on the porch watching, waiting. The moment he saw them, he started running. "Pa, Clara!" Thomas barely had time to dismount before Jacob crashed into him, arms wrapping tight around his father's waist. Clara slid off the horse and found herself caught in the embrace too, Jacob's other arm pulling her close. "You came back." Jacob's voice was muffled. "You promised, and you came back." "I did." Clara kissed the top of his head. "I told you I'd try." "Trying isn't the same as doing." Jacob looked up at her, his eyes wet. "But you did it anyway." Clara smiled, and for the first time in days, it felt real. "Yeah, I did." Thomas's hand found the small of her back. "Let's get inside. We all need rest." They walked toward the house together, the three of them, and Clara felt something shift in her chest. Something that had been locked away for 2 years, slowly beginning to open. She was still afraid, still broken in ways that might never fully heal. But standing here with Thomas's hand on her back and Jacob's fingers tangled with hers, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could learn to be whole again. That was when the gunshot rang out. Clara felt the impact before she heard it, a hot, searing pain in her left shoulder that drove her to her knees. She heard Jacob scream, heard Thomas roar something that might have been her name, heard more gunshots coming from everywhere and nowhere. "Clara!" Jacob was beside her, his small hands pressing against her shoulder, coming away red. "Clara, no!" She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. The world was tilting, colors bleeding together. She could see Thomas drawing his gun, firing at something in the darkness. Could see his men scrambling, returning fire. "Get her inside!" Thomas's voice, desperate, terrified. "Now!" Arms lifted her. Pain exploded through her body. She bit down on her lip hard enough to taste blood. "Don't you die!" Jacob's face swam above her. "Don't you dare die! You promised." "I promised to try," Clara thought. But the words stayed locked in her throat. Then the darkness took her. She woke to pain. Not the sharp screaming agony of the gunshot, but a deep throbbing ache that pulsed with every heartbeat. Clara opened her eyes and found herself in a bed. A real bed with clean sheets and soft pillows. "Easy." Thomas's voice close and rough. "Don't try to move." Clara turned her head and found him sitting beside the bed, his face haggard, his eyes red-rimmed. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "How long?" Her voice came out as a croak. "2 days." Thomas leaned forward, taking her hand. "The bullet went clean through, but you lost a lot of blood. The doctor said it was touch and go for a while." "Jacob." "Fine. Worried sick about you, but fine." Thomas's grip tightened. "Clara, I'm so sorry. We thought we'd cleared the area. We didn't know Porter had men in the hills." "Porter? He's still out there, still running." Thomas's jaw clenched. "He sent someone to kill you. A message, I think. To show me he can reach anyone I care about." Clara processed this slowly. Her mind felt foggy, wrapped in cotton. "He'll come back." "I know. He won't stop until you're destroyed." "I know that too." Thomas lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her fingers. "But he's not going to touch you again. I swear it." Clara looked at this man, This proud, stubborn, powerful man who'd built an empire out of nothing and was now watching it all burn. She saw the fear he was trying to hide, the guilt eating at him. "This isn't your fault. Isn't it?" His voice cracked. "I brought you into this. I made you a target. I made myself a target the moment I pulled your son out of the snow." Clara squeezed his hand weakly. "Don't you dare take that from me." Thomas stared at her. Something shifted in his expression, something Clara couldn't name. "You're incredible," he said quietly. "You know that. I'm stubborn. There's a difference." He almost smiled. "Rest. You need to heal." "Thomas." Clara held onto his hand when he tried to pull away. "What happens now? Now we end this. Once and for all." "How?" His eyes went hard. "I'm going to find Cornelius Porter, and I'm going to kill him." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to tell him revenge wasn't worth it, that violence only bred more violence, that there had to be another way. But she thought about Jacob, about Ellie and Whitmore and Hank, about all the people Porter had destroyed, the families he'd broken, the lives he'd ruined. Some men couldn't be reasoned with. Some men could only be stopped. "Then I'm coming with you." "Like hell you are. You've been shot. And I'll be shot again if Porter sends another assassin." Clara pushed herself up, ignoring the fire in her shoulder. "I'm not going to hide here and wait to die. If you're ending this, I'm ending it with you." "Clara, you said we face things together. Did you mean it?" Thomas's jaw worked. She could see him fighting with himself, wanting to protect her, knowing he couldn't lock her away. "You're going to get yourself killed." "Maybe." Clara swung her legs over the side of the bed, gritting her teeth against the pain. "But at least I'll die fighting." The door burst open, and Jacob came running in, his face lighting up when he saw Clara sitting up. "You're awake." He threw himself at her, carefully mindful of her bandaged shoulder. "I was so scared. The doctor said you might not wake up." "It takes more than a bullet to keep me down." Clara hugged him with her good arm. "I told you I'm hard to kill." "That's not funny." "Your father said the same thing." Jacob looked between them, his young face serious beyond his years. "Pa's going after Porter, isn't he?" "Yes." "And you're going with him?" Clara hesitated. How do you explain to a child that some battles have to be fought, that some evils can't be ignored? "I have to," she said finally. "Porter won't stop coming for us, for you. The only way to protect you is to stop him." "Then I'm coming too." "No." Clara and Thomas spoke at the same time. "Why not? He took me. He tried to kill Clara. He's been hurting people for years and nobody does anything about it." Jacob's hands were clenched into fists. "I'm not a baby anymore. I can help." "You're 9 years old." "I'm almost 10. "Jacob." Thomas knelt down, taking his son's shoulders. "What you're feeling right now, this anger, this need to fight back, I understand it. Believe me, I do. But the best thing you can do for us is stay here where you're safe." "But, listen to me." Thomas's voice was firm but gentle. "If something happened to you, it would destroy me. It would destroy Clara. Everything we're fighting for would mean nothing." Jacob's lip trembled. "I hate feeling useless." "You're not useless. You're the reason we're fighting." Thomas pulled him into a hug. "You're the reason any of this matters." Clara watched them, father and son, and felt her heart crack open a little more. "Jacob," she said softly, "do you remember what you asked me that night in the cellar?" He looked up. "Which thing?" "You asked if other people would stop for kids like you, the way I did." "I remember. When this is over, when Porter's gone and we're safe, I want to make sure they do. I want to build a place where lost children can go, where people in trouble can find help." Clara smiled at him. "I can't do that if I'm dead, and I can't do it without you." "Me? Who better? You know what it's like to be lost, to be scared, to need someone to stop." She reached out and touched his face. "Will you help me when this is over?" Jacob's eyes widened. You mean it? You want me to help? I can't think of anyone I'd want more. He looked at his father, who nodded slowly. Okay. Jacob's voice was stronger now. Okay, I'll stay. But you have to promise you'll come back. Both of you. Clara looked at Thomas. He looked at her. We promise, they said together. It was 3 more days before Clara could walk without support, and another 2 before she could hold a gun steady. Thomas wanted to wait longer, but word came that Porter had been spotted in Helena, meeting with lawyers and politicians trying to spin his version of events. He's going to claim self-defense, Marcus Stone reported grimly. Says you attacked his men first, that the kidnapping was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. Thomas's voice was ice. My son was tied up in a shack for 3 days. Money talks, sir, and Porter has a lot of it. Clara understood then. Porter wasn't just running, he was regrouping. If he could get the law on his side, turn public opinion against the Hartwells, he could destroy them without firing another shot. We have to stop him before he reaches Helena, she said, before he talks his way out of this. That's exactly what he's expecting. Thomas paced the room. He knows I'll come after him. He's probably got an ambush waiting. Then we don't come after him the way he expects. What do you mean? Clara thought about Porter, about his cold eyes and pleasant smile, about the way he'd manipulated everyone in Silver Creek for years, playing the generous merchant while squeezing them dry. Porter's power comes from his reputation. Everyone thinks he's a respectable businessman. They don't know about the kidnapping, the murders, the hostages. She looked at Thomas. What if they did? Who would believe us over him? What about the people he hurt, the families he destroyed? What about Briggs, the man who confessed to your men? Clara's mind was racing now. If we could get witnesses to come forward, if we could expose him publicly before he reaches Helena, he'd be finished. Thomas stopped pacing. Even if the law didn't touch him, no one would do business with him. He'd lose everything. His money, his influence, everything he's built. It's risky. If it doesn't work, we do it your way. Clara met his eyes. But let me try first. Let me take away his power before you take his life. Thomas studied her for a long moment. You really think it'll work? I think it's worth trying. Clara moved closer to him. You're not a killer, Thomas. You're a father and a rancher and a man who builds things. Don't let Porter turn you into something you're not. He shot you. And I survived. I'm standing right here. She took his hand. Let me do this. For you, for Jacob, for everyone Porter's ever hurt. Thomas looked at their joined hands. When he looked up again, something had changed in his eyes. All right, he said quietly. We do it your way. The plan came together faster than Clara expected. Thomas sent riders to every family Porter had wronged, offering protection and promising that their testimony would matter. One by one, they came forward. The Hendersons, who'd lost their farm when Porter called in their loan early. The Martins, whose general store had been driven out of business by Porter's undercutting. The widow Barnes, whose husband had died in suspicious circumstances after refusing to sell Porter his land. And finally, most damning of all, Briggs himself. The man who'd kidnapped Jacob, who'd been beaten half to death by Hartwell's men, who was now willing to testify against Porter in exchange for leniency. He told me everything, Marcus Stone reported. The bribes, the threats, the murders covered up as accidents. Porter's been running this territory like his own private kingdom for 20 years. And no one stopped him, Clara asked. Everyone was afraid, or bought off, usually both. Stone shook his head. But not anymore. You've given them something they never had before. What's that? Hope. Someone to rally behind. Someone who fought back and won. Clara didn't know what to say to that. She'd never thought of herself as a leader, never imagined that people would look to her for anything. But when Thomas gathered the witnesses in Silver Creek, when he stood before the crowd and promised justice, it was Clara they watched. Clara they cheered for. The widow who'd saved a rich man's son. The woman who'd walked into a collapsing mine to rescue hostages. The fighter who'd taken a bullet and kept coming. She'd become something she never expected. She'd become a symbol. Porter arrived in Silver Creek at noon on the 7th day. He came with armed men and expensive lawyers expecting to face Thomas Hartwell in a showdown. Instead, he found the entire town waiting for him. Clara watched from the steps of the trading post now under new management after Beatrice Harlow had fled in disgrace. Thomas stood beside her, his hand resting on his gun but not drawing it. Porter pulled his horse to a stop in the middle of the street. His face showed nothing, but Clara could see the calculation in his eyes. The confusion. This wasn't what he'd expected. "Hartwell." His voice was smooth as ever. "I hear you've been busy." "Not as busy as you," Thomas's voice carried across the crowd. "Kidnapping children, taking hostages, blowing up mines with people inside. Allegations, nothing more." Porter's smile didn't waver. "I'm sure we can discuss this like civilized men." "The time for discussion is over." Clara stepped forward, her injured arm in a sling, but her voice strong. "We have witnesses, Porter. A dozen families you've destroyed. A man who was there when you ordered Jacob Hartwell's kidnapping. Evidence of every bribe, every threat, every murder you've committed." Porter's smile flickered, just for a moment. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm surprised to see you alive. My condolences on your injury." "Save your condolences. You're going to need them." "Am I?" Porter's eyes swept the crowd. "You think these people will stand against me? I own half of them. I've kept this town alive for 20 years. You've kept it strangled." Hank Morrison stepped forward. His blacksmith's arms crossed over his chest. "My family's been under your thumb since I was a boy. Not anymore." "Nor mine." Ellie Crane's voice was thin but fierce. "You had your men threaten my grandchildren, Cornelius. My grandchildren." More voices joined in. More people stepping forward. The Hendersons, the Martins, Widow Barnes with tears streaming down her face. Porter's composure finally cracked. "You can't do this. I have lawyers. I have connections. I'll destroy all of you." "With what?" Thomas stepped forward, his voice cold. "Your money. Your influence. Look around you, Porter. It's gone. All of it. The banks have frozen your accounts pending investigation. The territorial governor has opened an inquiry, and every person you've ever bribed or threatened is standing right here ready to testify." Porter's face went white. "You can't prove anything." "We don't have to prove it to a jury." Clara's voice was steady. "We just have to prove it to them." She gestured at the crowd, at the people of Silver Creek who'd lived in fear for decades and were finally fighting back. "It's over, Cornelius. You've lost." For a long moment, Porter sat frozen on his horse. Clara could see him calculating, searching for an angle, a way out. Then his hand moved toward his gun. "Don't." Thomas's weapon was drawn before Porter's fingers touched the handle. "I've been waiting for an excuse, Porter. Don't give me one." Porter's hand stopped. "Get off the horse," Thomas ordered. "Slowly." Porter dismounted. His lawyers and guards looked around, realized they were outnumbered 50-1, and wisely kept their hands visible. "This isn't justice," Porter hissed. "This is a mob." "No." Clara walked forward until she was face to face with him. "This is what happens when you push people too far, when you take too much, when you forget that the people you've been stepping on can stand up." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper only he could hear. "You tried to destroy Thomas Hartwell. You kidnapped his son. You shot me and left me to die. And through all of it, you smiled your pleasant smile and pretended you were better than everyone else." Porter's eyes burned with hatred. "You're nothing. A poor widow with nothing to her name. Maybe," Clara smiled. "But this poor widow just brought down the most powerful man in Montana Territory." She turned and walked back to Thomas, leaving Porter standing alone in the middle of the street. The territorial marshal arrived the next morning. Porter was taken into custody, along with his lawyers and the guards who'd helped with the kidnapping. Briggs testified for 3 hours, laying out every crime in damning detail. By the end of the week, Cornelius Porter's empire had completely collapsed. Clara stood on the porch of Hartwell Ranch, watching the sun set over the mountains. Jacob sat beside her, a cup of hot chocolate in his hands. "Is it really over?" he asked. "It's over. Porter's never coming back. Never." Clara put her arm around him. He's going to spend the rest of his life in prison thinking about all the people he hurt. Good. Jacob's voice was fierce. He deserved worse. Maybe. But this way everyone knows what he did. His name is ruined forever. Clara looked at the boy she'd pulled from the snow, who'd somehow become as precious to her as her own child. That's a worse punishment than death for a man like him. Clara. Yeah. What happens now with you, I mean? It was a question Clara had been avoiding. The danger was over. Porter was gone. There was no reason for her to stay at the ranch anymore, except for all the reasons she couldn't put into words. "I don't know," she admitted. "I suppose I should go back to my cabin, check on my chickens, see what's left." "You could stay here." "Jacob, Pa wants you to stay. He told me." Jacob looked up at her with those old young eyes. "And I want you to stay too." Clara's heart clenched. "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because your father and we've been through something intense. Sometimes feelings that develop in crisis don't last when things get normal again." "That's stupid." Clara laughed, surprised. "Excuse me. I said that's stupid." Jacob set down his cup, turning to face her fully. "You love him. He loves you. I've seen how you look at each other." "Jacob, and I love you too. You're not my mother, and I know that. But you could be something. Something good." His voice cracked. "Please don't leave. I already lost my ma. I don't want to lose you too." Clara couldn't speak. Tears were streaming down her face, and she couldn't make them stop. "I lost my daughter," she finally managed. 2 years ago. She was 6 years old. "I know. You told me. I've been so scared of loving anyone else, scared of losing them the way I lost her. But you love me anyway. Don't you?" Clara nodded, unable to speak. "And you love Pa?" Another nod. "Then stay." Jacob took her hand. "Stay and be scared with us. It's better than being scared alone." Clara looked at this boy. This brave, wise, wonderful boy who'd stumbled into her life and refused to leave. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. People just don't listen to kids." Clara laughed through her tears. "All right." "All right what?" "All right, I'll stay. For now. We'll see what happens." Jacob's face split into a grin. "Really? Really?" He hugged her, careful of her shoulder, and Clara held him tight. "Jacob." Thomas's voice came from the doorway. "It's getting late. Time for bed." "But Pa..." "Bed. Clara will still be here in the morning." Jacob looked at Clara, who nodded. He sighed dramatically but went inside, pausing at the door to look back. "You promised." "I know. Go to sleep." He disappeared into the house. Thomas took his place on the porch, leaning against the railing beside her. "He told me you're staying." "For now. Just for now." Clara looked at him. At this man who'd fought beside her, protected her, trusted her when he had no reason to trust anyone. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of this. Of us. Of wanting something and having it taken away again." "I know." Thomas moved closer. "I'm scared too. You, the great Thomas Hartwell." "Even cattle barons have fears, Clara." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I lost Sarah. It nearly destroyed me. I swore I'd never let myself care about anyone like that again. And then a stubborn widow dragged my son out of a blizzard and refused to give him up. Even when the whole town turned against her. Even when my men surrounded her cabin. Clara remembered that moment. The terror. The determination. The absolute refusal to back down. I didn't have a choice. You did. You just made the right one. Thomas's hand cupped her face. You've been making the right choices since the moment I met you, even when it cost you everything. I don't feel brave. That's how you know it's real. He leaned closer. Clara Mitchell. I am asking you not as a favor, not as gratitude, but as a man who has fallen completely and terrifyingly in love with you. Stay. Not for now. Forever. Clara's breath caught. You love me. I love you. I love how fierce you are, how stubborn, how you see good in people everyone else has given up on. His voice dropped. I love that you faced your worst nightmare to save people you barely knew. I love that you make my son laugh. I love that you argue with me instead of telling me what I want to hear. Thomas. You don't have to say it back. You don't have to decide anything tonight. I just needed you to know. Clara looked at him, at the hope and fear warring in his eyes, at this man who'd built walls as high as hers, and was now tearing them down brick by brick. She thought about Lily, about Daniel, about all the love she'd lost, and all the pain she'd survived. And she thought about Jacob's words, it's better than being scared alone. I love you too. The words came out quiet, almost surprised. I didn't mean to, I didn't want to, but I do. Thomas's face transformed. The fear melted away, replaced by something that looked like joy. Yeah. Yeah. Clara smiled through fresh tears. I guess we're both fools. The best kind of fools. He leaned in and kissed her gentle and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, Clara was laughing and crying at the same time. What do we do now? Thomas pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. Now, he said, we build something new. Together. Clara rested her head against his chest and listened to his heartbeat. For the first time in 2 years, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like hope. 6 months changed everything. Clara stood at the window of what had once been Porter's trading post, watching workers carry furniture through the front door. The building had been transformed, its cold commercial space now warm and welcoming, with beds lining the walls and a kitchen big enough to feed 50. Silver Creek Haven. That's what they'd named it. You're doing that thing again. Thomas's voice came from behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. What thing? Standing at windows, looking worried. Clara leaned back against him. I'm not worried. I'm amazed. At what? At all of this. 6 months ago, I was a widow with nothing. Now I'm Mrs. Hartwell. Clara smiled. The wedding had been small. Just family and close friends held in the garden at the ranch 3 months after Porter's arrest. Jacob had served as ring bearer and cried harder than anyone. I was going to say someone who matters. But yes, Mrs. Hartwell too. Thomas kissed her hair. You always mattered, Clara. You just didn't know it. The front door banged open, and Jacob came running in his face, flushed with excitement. They're here. The first family's here. Clara's heart jumped. They'd been preparing for this moment for months, but suddenly it felt too soon. What if she wasn't ready? What if she failed these people the way she'd failed Lily? Hey! Thomas's hands squeezed her shoulders. You've got this. What if I don't? Then you'll figure it out, like you always do. Clara took a deep breath and turned to face the door. A woman stood in the entrance, thin and worn with hollow eyes that spoke of too many hard nights. She held a baby in one arm and gripped the hand of a small girl with the other. Behind her, a boy of about 12 carried everything they owned in a single bag. "Mrs. Hartwell." The woman's voice shook. They said you help people." Clara crossed the room and took the woman's free hand in both of hers. "What's your name?" "Mary. Mary Sullivan. This is Emma and Thomas Jr. and baby Ruth." Her voice cracked. "My husband died last month. Fever. We lost the farm. I didn't know where else to go." Clara thought about another winter night, another lost soul stumbling through the cold. She thought about the choice she'd made then and all the choices that had followed. "You're safe now, Mary. All of you." She guided the woman inside, nodding to the volunteers who'd come to help. "Get them warm. Get them fed. The rest we figure out tomorrow." Jacob was already at Emma's side, the little girl's hand in his. "Want to see the kitchen? Cook makes the best apple pie." Emma looked up at her mother, who nodded tearfully. Jacob led her away, chattering about all the wonderful things the Haven had to offer. Thomas watched his son go, something soft in his eyes. "He's good at this," Clara said. "He learned from the best." Mary Sullivan was the first, but she wasn't the last. Over the following weeks, they came in a steady stream. Widows like Clara had been. Orphans like Jacob almost became. Families broken by circumstance and cruelty and the simple bad luck of being poor in a hard land. Clara helped them all. She found jobs for those who could work and schooling for those who needed to learn. She connected people with distant relatives, rebuilt broken families, and created new ones from scratch. She fought with bureaucrats and charmed merchants and bullied the territorial government into providing support. And through it all, Thomas stood beside her. "You're going to burn yourself out." He found her at midnight one evening, still at her desk, still working through a stack of letters. "One more family. There's a situation in Helena. A mother with 3 children the father's been arrested for. Clara." He took the pen from her hand. "It'll still be there tomorrow." "But the Haven isn't going anywhere. Neither are you. But you need to sleep." Clara wanted to argue. There was so much to do, so many people who needed help. But Thomas was right. She couldn't save everyone if she destroyed herself in the process. "Come to bed." He pulled her to her feet. "I promise the world will keep spinning for a few hours." She let him lead her upstairs, let him hold her in the darkness, let herself rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new heartbreaks, new opportunities to make a difference. But tonight, she was allowed to be just Clara. Not Mrs. Hartwell. Not the woman who ran the Haven. Just Clara in the arms of the man who loved her. It was enough. A year after the Haven opened, the territorial governor came to visit. Clara greeted him at the door dressed in her finest dress, which was still simpler than what most wealthy women wore, with Thomas at her side and Jacob running between them. "Governor Morrison." She shook his hand firmly. "Welcome to Silver Creek Haven." The governor was a portly man with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He'd been skeptical of the Haven at first, seeing it as a drain on territorial resources, but the results had been impossible to ignore. "Mrs. Hartwell, I've heard impressive things about your operation here." "It's not an operation, sir. It's a home." "Indeed." His gaze swept the main hall, taking in the clean beds, the busy kitchen, the children playing in the corner. "How many have you housed this year?" 217 individuals, 43 families. "And how many have moved on to self-sufficiency?" 189. Clara felt a surge of pride. "We don't just give people shelter, Governor. We give them tools, skills, hope." "I can see that." The governor's skepticism was fading, replaced by something that looked like respect. "The Territorial Council has been debating funding for similar establishments across Montana. Your success here could serve as a model." Clara's heart leaped. "You mean?" "I mean, we'd like to discuss expanding your approach. With proper funding, of course." Thomas squeezed Clara's hand. She could feel his pride radiating off him. "I'd be honored, Governor." They spent the rest of the day touring the facility, discussing plans, dreaming bigger than Clara had ever dared to dream. By the time the governor left, he'd committed to presenting a funding proposal to the Territorial Council. "You did it!" Thomas lifted her off her feet and spun her around. "You actually did it! We did it!" Clara laughed, dizzy and happy and overwhelmed. "All of us." Clara. Jacob came running up, a telegram in his hand. "It just arrived." She took the paper and read it, her smile fading into something deeper. "What is it?" Thomas asked. "It's from Mary Sullivan. Remember her? The first family we took in?" "Of course. She's gotten married again. A good man, a farmer in the Bitterroot Valley. She says—" Clara's voice caught. "She says the Haven saved her life, that her children have a future because of what we did." Thomas pulled her close. "That's what this is all about, isn't it? Giving people futures." "That's what it's always been about." Clara looked around the Haven, at the beds filled with people who'd had nowhere else to go, at the kitchen serving hot meals, to hungry children at Jacob, teaching a group of orphans how to play cards in the corner. "When I found Jacob in the snow," she said quietly, "I didn't know this would happen. I was just doing what felt right." "That's how the best things start." Thomas kissed her forehead. "One person doing what feels right. And then the next, and the next, until you've got something nobody expected." Clara thought about that cold night 1.5 years ago, about the storm and the fear, and the moment she'd decided to step outside and see if someone needed help. Such a small choice, such enormous consequences. "Clara," Jacob had appeared beside them, his young face serious. "There's someone here to see you." "Who?" "She says her name is Sarah Morrison." Clara frowned. The name wasn't familiar. "I don't know any Sarah Morrison." "She says she knew your husband, Daniel." Clara's breath caught. Thomas's hand tightened on hers. "I'll come with you," he said. "No." Clara straightened her shoulders. "This is something I need to do alone." She followed Jacob to the small office at the back of the Haven. An old woman sat in the chair by the window, her face weathered by time and hardship. She looked up when Clara entered, and there was something in her eyes that made Clara's heart twist. "Mrs. Hartwell." The woman's voice was thin. "Thank you for seeing me." "Mrs. Morrison." Clara sat across from her. "You knew my husband." "I knew him well. He worked in my son's mine." She paused. "The mine where he died." Clara's hands clenched in her lap. "I see. I've wanted to speak with you for years, but I was afraid. Afraid you'd blame me. Blame my family." "Why would I blame you?" The old woman looked down at her hands. "Because my son knew the mine was unsafe. He'd been warned about the support beams, but repairs cost money, and money was tight, and he kept putting it off." Clara's blood went cold. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying Daniel's death wasn't an accident. It was negligence. My son's negligence." Tears streamed down the woman's face. "He died 2 years ago, my son. Heart attack. But before he went, he made me promise to find you, to tell you the truth, to beg your forgiveness." Clara sat in stunned silence. All these years she'd thought Daniel's death was just bad luck, a tragedy without cause or blame. But it hadn't been. It had been preventable. It had been someone's fault. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I heard about the Haven, about what you're doing here, about the lives you're saving." Mrs. Morrison reached out with a trembling hand. "I thought you should know that your husband's death wasn't meaningless. All the good you're doing, all the people you're helping, it started because of him, because you lost him and had to become someone new." Clara wanted to be angry, wanted to rage at this woman and her dead son and the unfairness of it all. But she thought about Daniel, about the man he'd been, kind, generous, always helping neighbors, always lending a hand. He would have forgiven them. She knew it with absolute certainty. Daniel would have forgiven them because that's who he was. And maybe it was time she became who she was supposed to be too. Mrs. Morrison. Clara took the woman's hand. I forgive you. I forgive your son. The old woman sobbed, clutching Clara's fingers. Thank you. Thank you. I don't deserve... None of us deserve the grace we're given. Clara smiled gently. But we accept it anyway, and we try to pass it on. Mrs. Morrison stayed for dinner. She left the next morning with a promise to return, and Clara watched her go with a heart that felt lighter than it had in years. Are you all right? Thomas found her at the window as he always did. I think so. Clara leaned into him. I think I finally am. 2 years after the Haven opened, they broke ground on a second location. Helena this time larger than Silver Creek, with room for 100 people and a school attached. The Territorial Council had approved funding for 3 more with plans for additional locations across Montana and into neighboring territories. Clara stood at the construction site watching workers lay the foundation. Thomas was beside her as always. Jacob, now 12, and growing like a weed, stood on her other side. It's really happening, she said. It's been happening for a while. Thomas's voice was warm. You're just finally seeing it. Mrs. Hartwell. A worker came running over. There's a problem with the foundation. We need your approval on a change. Clara sighed. There was always something. I'll be right there. She turned to Thomas. Keep an eye on our son. I'm not a child, Jacob protested. You'll always be my child. Clara kissed his forehead. Even when you're old and gray and running the Haven yourself. Jacob's face lit up. You mean it? You want me to take over someday? Who else you've been helping since the beginning? You know these people. You understand what we're trying to do. But I thought, Pa always said the ranch would be mine. Thomas chuckled. The ranch will be yours, but the Haven is your mother's legacy. I think she wants you to carry both. Jacob looked between them, overwhelmed. I'll try, he said finally. I'll try to be worthy of it. You already are, sweetheart. Clara hugged him tight. You always have been. She walked toward the construction site, her heart full to bursting. This was her life now. Not the lonely widow she'd been. Not the broken woman who'd stood at windows and wondered if the pain would ever fade. She was Clara Hartwell. Mother, wife, builder of havens, saver of lost souls. She was everything she'd never dared to dream. The dedication ceremony was held on a brilliant autumn day, 3 years to the day after Clara had found Jacob in the snow. The crowd filled the main hall of the Helena Haven, spilling out into the streets. Governors and senators had come. Newspaper reporters from across the country. Families who'd been helped by the original Haven returning to witness the expansion. Clara stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces. 3 years ago, she began, her voice carrying across the room. I was alone. I'd lost my husband. I'd lost my daughter. I'd lost any hope that life could be anything but pain. She paused, gathering herself. And then, on the worst night of that terrible year, I heard something outside my door. A sound that didn't belong to the storm. A cry that sounded almost human. She found Jacob in the crowd, standing with Thomas, both of them watching her with eyes full of love. I could have ignored it, told myself it was the wind, gone back to my bed and my grief and my careful distance from anything that might hurt me again. She smiled. But I didn't. I opened my door. I walked into the cold, and I found a child who needed help. The room was silent, hanging on every word. That boy changed my life, not because of who his father was or what rewards I might receive. He changed my life because he reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Something I think all of us forget sometimes when life gets hard and the world seems cruel. Clara leaned forward, her voice dropping, but still carrying to every corner of the room. We need each other. That's the simple truth of it. We need each other to survive, to grow, to become who we're meant to be. She gestured at the building around them. This haven exists because one person stopped for another, because kindness sparked kindness and hope sparked hope, until what started as a single act of compassion became something none of us could have imagined. She looked at Mary Sullivan sitting in the front row with her new husband and her children, at Mrs. Morrison, who'd become a regular volunteer, at the dozens of families who'd passed through the haven and built new lives. I can't save everyone. None of us can. But we can save someone. We can be the person who stops, the hand that reaches out, the door that opens when everything else is closed. Her voice grew stronger, ringing with conviction. That's what the haven means, not just a building, not just beds and meals and shelter from the storm. It's a promise that no one has to face the darkness alone. She stepped back from the podium. Today we open the second Silver Creek Haven. Tomorrow, God willing, there will be a third, and a fourth, and as many as it takes until every lost soul in this territory knows there's a place for them, a family waiting, a future worth fighting for. She raised her hand. To the haven, to the people who built it, and to everyone who will walk through its doors seeking hope and finding home. The crowd erupted in applause. Clara found Thomas in the chaos that followed, his arms opening to catch her as she fell into them. "You were magnificent," he said into her hair. "I was terrified. That's how you know it was real." Jacob pushed through the crowd to join them, wrapping his arms around both his parents. "We did it," he said. "We actually did it." Clara held her family close and let the tears fall. They'd done it. Against all odds, against all expectations, against everything that had tried to break them. They'd built something that would outlast them all. That night, after the guests had gone and the building had emptied, Clara walked through the haven alone. She touched the beds that would soon hold sleeping children, the tables that would serve warm meals, the doors that would open to anyone who needed them. "Lily," she whispered into the silence, "I wish you could see this." She thought about her daughter, about the bright little girl who'd love to climb trees and chase butterflies and ask questions that had no answers. Lily would have loved the haven, would have been the first to welcome new arrivals, to share her toys, to make everyone feel at home. "I carried you with me," Clara said softly. "Every step of the way. You and Daniel both. You're part of everything good I've ever done." She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Thomas standing in the doorway. Talking to ghosts. Talking to family. He came to stand beside her, taking her hand. "They'd be proud of you, Clara. Both of them." "I know." She leaned into him. "I finally know." They stood together in the darkness, two people who'd found each other against impossible odds, who'd built something beautiful from the ashes of their pain. "Ready to go home?" Thomas asked. Clara looked around the haven one last time, at the dream that had started with a lost boy in a snowstorm and grown into something that would touch thousands of lives. "Yeah," she said. "I'm ready." They walked out together, hand in hand, into a world that had been transformed by compassion. And somewhere in the winter sky, the stars shone down on Silver Creek Haven, on the woman who'd built it, on all the lost souls who would find their way home. The smallest act of kindness, given freely and without expectation, had rippled outward in ways no one could have predicted. And those ripples had become waves. And those waves had changed everything. Clara Mitchell Hartwell had opened her door on the worst night of her life, and in doing so, she'd opened doors for generations to come. That was her legacy. That was her haven. That was her truth. And it was more than enough. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that remind us of the power of compassion and the strength found in doing what's right, even when no one is watching.